He won. That was the only thought in his head. Marcus Thorne, a man who saw the world as a game of winners and losers, had just secured his title. He'd walked out of that courtroom with everything: the house, the portfolio, the victory. He left his ex-wife Elena with nothing but her maiden name and a check he considered a charitable donation. As he adjusted his $5,000 tie, a smug smirk played on his lips. He was free. He was rich. He was a winner. But the funny thing about winning is that you have to make sure you're playing the right game. The sterile, fluorescent light of the Los Angeles County Courthouse hallway was unkind. It highlighted the weariness etched around Elena Hayes's eyes and the faint tremor in her hands as she clutched a worn leather briefcase. Across from her, a scene of quiet triumph was unfolding. Marcus Thorne, her husband of 12 years, now officially ex-husband, was laughing. It was a low, confident chuckle shared with his lawyer, a man aptly named Roger Harding, whose face looked like it had been carved from polished, unforgiving granite. "A clean break, Marcus," Harding was saying, clapping his client on the shoulder. "Cleaner than most." "It's what we paid for, isn't it, Roger?" Marcus replied. His voice, that smooth baritone that had once charmed venture capitalists and silenced boardrooms, was slick with satisfaction. He was a man built by high-end tailors and his own ruthless ambition. Today, he wore a custom Zegna suit dark as a shark's eye. He looked like he was closing a billion-dollar deal, not ending a marriage. To him, perhaps they were the same. The judge had hammered the gavel down just 10 minutes prior. The ruling was brutal. The prenuptial agreement signed by a 25-year-old Elena who was dizzy in love and blind to the fine print was upheld. Ironclad, Harding had called it. Marcus retained 100% of his company, Thorne Capital. He retained the Pacific Palisades mansion, the one Elena had spent 3 years designing with architect Ken Lin. He retained the art collection, her art collection, the one she had painstakingly curated, which he had always called her little hobby. Elena Hayes, formerly Thorne, walked away with a one-time lump sum payout. It was a staggering amount to an average person, but compared to the empire she had helped build, it was an insult. It was, as Marcus had so crudely put it during depositions, severance. Elena's lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, a sharp-eyed woman who seemed to be vibrating with a suppressed fury, placed a hand on her arm. "Elena, it's over. Let's go." "Just a moment," Elena whispered. Her voice was hoarse. Marcus saw them. The show wasn't over. He straightened his silk tie, the smirk finding its full, arrogant bloom. He strode over his Italian leather shoes, clicking an expensive, lonely rhythm on the polished floor. He stopped a foot in front of her. He was taller, broader, a physical eclipse. "Elena," he said, his tone dripping with a grotesque faux pity, "I want you to know this was business, nothing personal." Elena's gaze lifted. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were dry. She had run out of tears weeks ago. "Was it business, Marcus? Or was it a game?" He chuckled, that same self-satisfied sound. "In my world, sweetheart, they're the same thing, and you always have to play to win." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a slim silver card holder. He extracted a business card. Marcus Thorne, CEO and founder, Thorne Capital. "If you know," he gestured vaguely. "If you ever find yourself in a real jam, my new assistant Candy can probably find a spot for you. Reception, maybe." It was the final twisting of the knife. The implication that she, a woman with a dual master's in art history and business from Yale, was fit only for answering his phones. Elena didn't take the card. She just looked at his hand until he almost awkwardly let it drop to his side. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said. "Good luck, Elena," he said, the smirk returning wider than ever. He turned to leave. "Try not to, well, just good luck." He patted her shoulder as he passed. A gesture of ownership, of dismissal. Elena didn't flinch. She just watched him walk away. She watched as he and Harding got into the elevator, his laughter echoing in the sterile hall. She watched the polished steel doors slide shut, sealing her past away. "He thinks he won." Sarah, her lawyer, said, her voice tight. "Yes." Elena said, her voice surprisingly steady, though it felt like it was coming from a great distance. "He does." She took a deep breath, the first one that didn't feel like it was filtered through razor blades. She turned to Sarah, a flicker of something new, something cold and hard igniting in her eyes. "Is it done?" Elena asked. Sarah Jenkins checked her phone. A single new text message. She smiled. It was not a nice smile. "The asset freeze is complete," Sarah said. "The SEC just filed the motion. Project Lyra is officially grounded." Elena nodded, a single sharp movement. "Good. Let's go." As they walked towards the exit, Elena finally allowed herself a small secret smile. Marcus was right. It was a game. He had just been playing the wrong one. The marriage hadn't started with a prenup. It had started with a painting. Elena Hayes was 24, the youngest ever guest curator at the Getty, giving a lecture on the provenance of Dutch masters. He was Marcus Thorne, 30, a junior partner at a small venture capital firm, and he was bored. He'd been dragged there by a potential investor, Arthur Pennington, an old money fossil who cared more for art than algorithms. Marcus was about to fake a phone call when he heard her speak. It wasn't just her voice, though. It was lovely, clear, and confident. It was the way she spoke. She wasn't just describing the art. She was telling its story. She wove a narrative of secret patrons, stolen canvases, and the chemical composition of a specific long-lost blue pigment. That night, Arthur Pennington, utterly charmed, pledged $5 million to Marcus's new fund. Marcus didn't see the art. He saw the tool. He pursued her with the same single-minded focus he applied to a hostile takeover. Elena, a romantic intellectual, was swept away. He was charismatic, brilliant, and he seemed to see her. He praised her mind, not just her beauty. He told her she was his secret weapon. "You, Lena," he'd murmur, kissing her temple after a successful dinner party. "You speak their language. I just speak money. You speak legacy." She fell for it. She married him. She signed the prenup without a lawyer of her own. "It's just a formality, baby," he'd said, brushing her hair from her face. "A just in case. The partners insist." The first 5 years were a blur of ambition. Elena put her PhD on hold. Then she put her career on hold. Her new job, as Marcus called it, was him. She was the perfect hostess. She knew which wine to serve the Vandermeer family, what topic to avoid with the Japanese tech mogul, and exactly which obscure 18th century sculpture to place in the sightline of a difficult investor. She built their social world. She cultivated the connections. She turned Marcus Thorne, a smart but rough-edged hustler, into Mr. Marcus Thorne, a polished, formidable player. The house in the Palisades was her project. He gave her an unlimited budget, his first grand gesture of trust. She poured her soul into it, creating a space that was both a home and a masterpiece of modern design. It became the place to be. A party at the Thorne residence was a guaranteed entry into the social pages. And Marcus's star rose. Thorne Capital became a powerhouse. The first crack appeared not with a bang, but with a password. Elena was handling their shared calendar, another of her wifely duties, when she saw an entry, Project Lyra, final. It was on a Saturday. She was supposed to be in New York for a gallery opening. He'd told her he had a board retreat. Curious, she tried to open the attached file. It was password protected. She tried the usual, their anniversary, his birthday, password 1223. Nothing. On a whim, she typed in the name of his first ever successful stock flip, a name he'd told her in their early wine-soaked nights of sharing secrets. Icarus. The file opened. It wasn't a board retreat. It was a network of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and wire transfers. It was vast. And at the center of it was Project Lyra, a deal she recognized. It was a deal she had helped him land. It was the deal with the Vandermeer family, a green tech initiative she had personally pitched to the matriarch Beatrix Vandermeer over tea, and a discussion of 17th century tulip cultivation. Marcus had told her the deal fell through. A total loss, he'd lamented before taking her to Cabo to get over the disappointment. But here it was. Not a loss, but a massive secret success. He had not only closed the deal, but he had structured it to bypass Thorn Capital's main accounts and therefore their marital assets. He had hidden $80 million. She scrolled deeper, her blood turning to ice. She saw transfers to other accounts. One in particular had a recurring payment. A condo in Miami. A car lease. The name on the transfer authorization was C. Alvarez. Candy. Elena closed the laptop. The click of the lid was deafening in the silent glass-walled office that overlooked the Pacific Ocean. The house she had built suddenly felt like a mausoleum. She wasn't his partner. She wasn't his secret weapon. She was just his first investor, the one he was planning to cut loose. For 6 months, she played the part. She was the perfect, oblivious wife. She smiled at the parties. She approved flower arrangements. She ignored the late-night meetings and the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his suits. Inside, she was a different person. She was a forensic investigator. Every night after he fell asleep, a deep, dreamless slumber of the self-assured, she would go to her office. She memorized account numbers. She photographed documents with a burner phone. She traced the labyrinth of his deceit from the Cayman Islands to Delaware to a small, unassuming bank in Zurich. She learned his real business, the fraud, the tax evasion, the way he was systematically draining the company to build a new life, one that didn't include her. She knew that if she confronted him, he would destroy her. He would use the ironclad prenup, his army of lawyers, and her emotional instability to leave her with nothing. So she didn't confront him. She prepared. She needed a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. She couldn't walk into a top-tier LA firm. Marcus had half of them on retainer. She needed someone he would never see coming. She started looking for her own secret weapon. And in her research, scrolling through obscure legal journals, she found a name. A fixer, known in elite circles, a ghost who specialized in impossible divorces. The problem was this lawyer was unreachable. Unless Elena remembered a name from her past. A reclusive, eccentric collector she had briefly corresponded with years ago about a rare painting. He was known for his unusual connections. He was also known to despise men like Marcus Thorn. She dug out the old monogrammed stationery. She picked up her favorite fountain pen. It was a long shot. A desperate wild pass. She wrote a letter, not asking for help, but offering a story. A story about a J.M.W. Turner painting a fraudulent financier and a wife who had finally learned to see the true pigment. She sent the letter via private courier to an unlisted address in Switzerland. 2 weeks later, a new encrypted phone appeared on her doorstep. No note, no card. She turned it on. There was one number in the contacts saved under a single ominous letter B. She pressed call. A voice answered. It was quiet, cultured, and carried the weight of old-world power. "Mrs. Thorne," the voice said without preamble. "Or perhaps I should say Ms. Hayes. I received your letter. I must say your analysis of the slave ship was insightful. Tell me more about the man who thinks he can paint over a masterpiece." His name was Julian Alistair Blackwood, and he was about to change the game. Marcus Thorne was in a magnificent mood. He left the courthouse, tossed his briefcase onto the passenger seat of his Aston Martin DB11, and peeled out of the parking garage. The judge's words echoed in his head. The court finds in favor of Mr. Thorne. He won. He'd kept his house. He'd kept his money. He'd swatted Elena away like a fly. He blasted Frank Sinatra. I did it. My way. He hit the speed dial for Candy. "Hey, baby," he crooned, merging onto the Pacific Coast Highway. "Guess who's officially a free man?" "Ooh, really, baby?" Candy's voice was breathy and high. "Does that mean we can finally go public? I've been dying to post that pic from Cabo." "Post away, sweetheart," Marcus laughed. And book a table at Spago, the best one. We're celebrating. I just closed the deal of a lifetime." He hung up, feeling the sun on his face. He was invincible. Instead of heading straight home to the Palisades, he took a detour. He drove toward the Marina del Rey. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he just wanted to look at the water. Maybe subconsciously he wanted to drive by the small slip where his boat, a modest 40-foot Sea Ray, was docked, the boat Elena had always called his toy. He passed the main channel where the serious boats were, and then he saw it. It wasn't a boat. It was a floating fortress. It was a 350-foot super yacht, a sleek, menacing blade of obsidian and chrome. It was parked in the private deep-water dock usually reserved for visiting royalty or tech demigods. It was the Astria. Marcus knew the Astria. Everyone in his world knew it. It was a ghost ship, a legend. It belonged to the most reclusive and terrifying man in global finance, Julian Alistair Blackwood. Blackwood wasn't just rich. Rich was what Marcus was. Blackwood was powerful. He didn't just own companies, he owned industries. Shipping rare earth minerals, AI development. He was old money aristocracy mixed with new money ruthlessness. He was rumored to move markets with a single encrypted email. He was, in a word, a god. An unseen, vengeful god. Marcus slowed the Aston Martin, his Sinatra forgotten. He stared, impressed and slightly jealous. What was Blackwood doing in L.A.? He was about to drive on when he saw movement on the aft deck. A gangway impossibly sleek had been extended to the private dock. A woman was stepping off. She was wearing a simple white linen sundress. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a loose, artless ponytail. She was barefoot. She looked young, lighter. She turned and laughed, a sound that carried across the water, clear as a bell. It was a laugh Marcus hadn't heard in a decade. His foot slammed on the brake. The Aston Martin fishtailed slightly. It was Elena, but it wasn't his Elena. Not the worn-out, defeated woman in the drab gray suit he had just decimated in court. This Elena was radiant. She was glowing. She stepped onto the dock. A man's hand reached out to steady her. Not a crew member in a uniform. A man in a dark, custom-made polo shirt and white trousers. The man stepped out from the yacht's shadow into the full golden glare of the California sun. Marcus went cold. His blood felt like it had been replaced with ice water. It was Julian Alistair Blackwood. He wasn't what Marcus had expected. He wasn't old. He was perhaps 50, with sharp aristocratic features, silvering hair at the temples, and the most arresting, intelligent eyes Marcus had ever seen. He wasn't smiling, but his gaze on Elena was intimate, possessive. He said something, and Elena laughed again, leaning her head against his shoulder for a brief, familiar moment. Blackwood then looked up directly at the road. Directly at the flashy, conspicuous Aston Martin stopped dead in the middle of it. He didn't know Marcus. He couldn't. But his eyes, cold gray and utterly devoid of emotion, seemed to scan him, assess him, and dismiss him in a single chilling instant. Then Julian Alistair Blackwood did something that stopped Marcus's heart. He smiled. It was a small, thin, cold smile, and it was aimed right at Marcus. It was the smile of a predator that has just spotted its prey. Elena turned, following his gaze. She saw the Aston Martin. She saw Marcus, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror silhouetted behind the glass. Her laugh died. Her expression didn't change. She didn't look sad. She didn't look angry. She didn't look anything. She simply held his gaze. Then, in a gesture of ultimate devastating dismissal, she turned her back on him. She took Blackwood's offered arm, and together they walked up the dock toward a waiting, unmarked black Bentley. Marcus sat there, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The silence in the car was absolute. The Sinatra song had ended. His phone buzzed. A text from Candy. Spago at 8. 3. 3. 3. Marcus didn't see it. All he could see was Elena, his mousy, defeated, cast-off wife, walking away with a man who could buy and sell Marcus Thorne before breakfast. The smirk he'd worn out of the courthouse felt like a grotesque painted-on grimace. It was gone. In its place was a new, unfamiliar sensation. It was fear. "What?" he whispered to the empty car. "What the hell is going on?" The Palisades mansion had never felt so cold. Marcus stood in the center of the vast, minimalist living room the one Architectural Digest had featured. The floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooked a black, glittering expanse of the Pacific. The house he had won. He had a glass of 30-year-old Macallan in his hand. It tasted like ash. He was replaying the scene at the marina over and over. Elena, Blackwood, the Astria, the smile. His first thought, she was sleeping with him. It was the only way it made sense. His plain, bookish Elena had somehow impossibly landed the biggest whale on the planet. He felt a flash of, not jealousy, but offense. She was his. How dare she? But that didn't add up. The Julian Blackwood he'd heard about didn't do scandals. He didn't dally with newly divorced wives of second-rate financiers. He grabbed his phone and called Roger Harding, his lawyer. "Marcus, you should be celebrating." Harding's voice boomed. "Shut up and listen," Marcus snapped. "Who is Elena's lawyer, the new one? Sarah Jenkins." "Jenkins, I told you she's a junior league shark. Out of her depth. Why?" "She's not. I'm running her name. She's a ghost. No online presence, no firm website. Where did she come from?" "Marcus, you won. It doesn't matter." "It matters," Marcus roared. "And one more thing. I want you to find out what Julian Alistair Blackwood is doing in Los Angeles." There was a dead silence on the line. "Blackwood." Harding's voice was suddenly 2 octaves higher. "The Astria Blackwood." "Yes, that Blackwood. He's here. And I think he's with Elena." The silence that followed was so profound Marcus thought the call had dropped. "Roger." "Marcus." Harding said, his voice now a strained, sober whisper. "You need to be very, very careful. Do not call me again on this line. Do not call him. Do not do anything." The call clicked off. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Marcus's chest. He poured another whiskey. He did what he always did when he was in trouble. He called his private investigator, a former Mossad agent named Ari, who specialized in corporate espionage. "Ari, I need you on Julian Blackwood and my ex-wife Elena Hayes." "Blackwood?" Ari's voice was flat. "That will be expensive." "I don't care what it costs," Marcus snarled. "I want to know where they met, what they're doing, and where she's sleeping. I want it by morning." Marcus didn't sleep. He paced the cold marble floors of his house, the whiskey doing nothing to dull the sharp edges of his anxiety. At 4:17 a.m. his encrypted phone buzzed. A file from Ari. It wasn't a long report. It was a single paragraph and 3 attachments. Subject: Hayes Elena. Re Blackwood J.A. No confirmed romantic link. Subject has been residing for 94 days at the Continuum, a private, unlisted penthouse property in Century City. Property is owned by Alistair Holdings, a Blackwood shell corp. Subject's legal counsel, Sarah A. Jenkins, is not a divorce attorney. She is the lead counsel for Blackwood's North American Acquisitions and Risk Division. Her personal firm, Jenkins & Associates, is a known Blackwood subsidiary specializing in forensic accounting and reputational cleansing. Attachments: 1. SEC Flag Request 774 B PDF. 2. IRS Subpoena International Wire Transfer 8938. PDF. 3. File Lawthorne Capital Project Lyra. Whistleblower. Zip. Marcus's hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped the phone. 94 days. Elena had been in a Blackwood-owned property for 3 months, before she even filed for divorce. Sarah Jenkins, Forensic Accounting. He clicked on the third attachment. Whistleblower. Zip. He entered his password. The file opened. It was his file. The one from his laptop. The Icarus file. It was every offshore account. Every illegal transfer. Every lie. It was a complete itemized and perfectly documented record of his fraud. He stared, his vision tunneling. The court case. The argument over the house. The insulting payout. It was all a distraction. It was a show. A puppet show designed to keep him busy, to make him look at the marital assets while she wasn't trying to win the divorce. She was trying to lose it. She had to prove she had no financial stake, no motive, to establish herself as a disgruntled party, not a co-conspirator. He thought back to the courtroom. Elena's defeated slump. Her lawyer's fury. It was theater. It was all a goddamn performance. He had walked into that courtroom thinking he was the lion. He was the lamb. He was being led to the slaughter. She, he stammered, sinking into a $50,000 Eames chair. She gave him the house. She let him win the art. She let him keep his company, because she knew. She knew that the house was about to be seized as an asset bought with laundered money. She knew the art collection would be impounded. And she knew that Thorn Capital, his entire empire, was a house of cards that she had just handed gift wrap to the IRS and the SEC. The phone rang. It was his main office line diverting to his cell. It was 4:30 a.m. "Hello," he whispered. "Mr. Thorne?" The voice was brisk, official. "This is Agent Davies from the Securities and Exchange Commission, Los Angeles Field Office. We are calling to inform you that a freeze has been placed on all assets related to Thorn Capital and its subsidiaries pending a federal investigation into... Well, the list is quite long. We'd like you to be at our office at 8 a.m. sharp. And, sir, you should probably bring a lawyer, a criminal lawyer." Marcus Thorne let the phone slip from his numb fingers. It clattered onto the marble floor, the agent's voice still tinny and distant. He looked out the window. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in sickening shades of pink and orange. He hadn't been swindled. He hadn't been outplayed. He had been hunted. And the smirk he saw at the Marina Blackwood's cold, thin smile wasn't a hello. It was a checkmate. The bottom had fallen out 6 months ago. After Elena discovered the Icarus file, she spent a week in a fog of pure, undiluted despair. She was trapped. She was a bird in a gilded cage, and the door had just been welded shut. If she left him, the prenup would leave her destitute. If she stayed, she was a silent partner to a criminal. If she exposed him, he would drag her down with him. He'd claim she was complicit, that her hobby of curating their art collection was in fact money laundering. He was smart enough to have implicated her even passively. She was trapped. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She disappeared into the art. There was a small private gallery in Culver City that was showing a piece on loan, J.M.W. Turner's Slave Ship Slavers Throwing Overboard the Dead and Dying. Elena had written her graduate thesis on it. She stood before the chaotic, violent, and terrifyingly beautiful canvas for almost an hour. It was a painting about a horrific, inhuman crime, the captain of a slave ship throwing the sick and dying overboard to collect insurance money. A crime of profit. It was a masterpiece of hidden brutality. The sublime, fiery sunset almost completely masked the drowning hands and monstrous fish in the foreground. It was, she thought, a perfect portrait of her husband. He saw the beauty, but also the balance sheet, a quiet voice said beside her. Elena started. She hadn't realized anyone else was there. The man was standing just behind her shoulder. He was impeccably dressed, but his clothes were understated. He had the kind of face that wasn't handsome but compelling. His eyes, a pale, watchful gray, were fixed on the canvas. "The insurance claim," Elena whispered, her voice rusty. "The Zong massacre. He painted the invoice. The man turned his head and his gaze was electric. Very few people see that. They see a sunset. You see the fraud. It's hard to miss, Elena said, if you know what you're looking for. He looked at her, really looked at her with an intensity that made her feel seen for the first time in years. I am Julian Blackwood, he said, offering a hand. I own the gallery and this painting. Elena, Hayes, she said, deliberately dropping the thorn. They didn't speak again for 10 minutes. They just looked at the painting. You're the woman who wrote the letter on Dutch pigment, he said finally. It wasn't a question. I am, she said, and you are the wife of Marcus Thorne, the man who leveraged his wife's connection to the Van der Meer family and then hid the profits in a shell company named Project Lyra. Elena's heart stopped. She turned to face him, her body rigid with shock and fear. How do you... Beatrix Van der Meer is my godmother, Blackwood said simply, his eyes never leaving the painting. She was displeased to learn her green tech investment was being used to fund a condo in Miami. She asked me to look into it, and my investigation led me to Mr. Thorne. And to you. He turned to her. The letter you wrote me. It wasn't about pigment, was it, Ms. Hayes? It was a flare. You were testing the waters, seeing if I was an ally. Elena was silent. You are in a very dangerous position, Blackwood said. Your husband is not just an adulterer. He is a high-level fraudster, and he has made you a party to it. The art you've been collecting, he's been buying it with laundered funds, using your expertise as a cover. When he falls, he will make sure he lands on you. Elena's legs gave out. She reached for a nearby bench, sinking onto it. What can I do? Right now, nothing, he said. If you divorce him, he'll crush you. He'll use the prenup and you'll have nothing to fight him with. If you report him, he'll claim you were his partner and you'll go to prison with him. He has built a perfect trap. So that's it, she said, the despair she'd been holding back finally cracking her voice. I'm done. Blackwood sat beside her. He was still a creature of immense contained energy. There is, he said, a third option. He looked at her. You let him destroy you. I don't understand. You file for divorce. You hire an average lawyer. You fight him on the marital assets, the house, the art, the bank accounts. You make him believe he is in a fight for his money. This will occupy his lawyers. It will occupy him. He is arrogant. He will be so focused on winning the divorce he won't see what's happening to his business. What is happening to his business? While he is in court fighting you over a sofa, Blackwood said, my team will be conducting a full forensic audit. We will take the information you've gathered, your Icarus file, and we will build a case, a criminal case. We will deliver it anonymously to the SEC and the IRS. Elena stared at him. You want me to lose. I want you to play the long game. Let him win the house. Let him keep his company. Let him smirk his way out of that courthouse. Because the moment the gavel falls, the real case begins. By the time he walks out victorious, his assets will be frozen, his boat will be seized, and his house will be a crime scene. He paused. This will be difficult. You will have to be the wronged wife. You will be publicly humiliated. He will paint you as a gold digger, then as a failure. You will have to take it. You will have to lose. Elena looked back at the Turner, the drowning hands hidden in the beautiful, chaotic waves. And you, she asked, why are you doing this? For your godmother. Blackwood's face hardened just slightly. Let's just say, I have a deep, abiding distaste for men who build empires on the backs of others, and I have an even deeper respect for masterpieces that have been undervalued. He stood up. I will provide you with a lawyer. Her name is Sarah Jenkins. She will be your underdog counsel. I will also provide you with a safe, secure place to live while this is happening. You will leave his house tonight. And when it's over, Blackwood said, his win will be worthless, and you will be free. He handed her a simple black business card. It had only a phone number. Ms. Jenkins is waiting. The choice, Ms. Hayes, is yours. Elena looked at the card. She looked at the painting. She thought of Marcus's smirk. She stood up. He can't just paint over the crime. He can't. No, Blackwood agreed. He can't. Where do I start? Elena asked. A small, satisfied smile touched Blackwood's lips. You already have. The next 3 months were the hardest of Elena's life, but they were also the most focused. She lived in the Continuum penthouse, a place that existed outside the normal geography of Los Angeles. It was a sterile, silent apartment in the sky, all glass and shadow, with a view that stretched from the San Gabriel Mountains to the pale, indifferent Pacific. It was a fortress provided by Blackwood, and its security was absolute. But it was also a prison. Elena spent her days in a state of suspended animation. She ate, she slept, she read, but she was not living. She was tempering. The woman who had left the courthouse shattered and betrayed was being burned away. In her place, a new woman was being forged, one made of cold tungsten resolve. Her only visitor was Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was not a junior league shark. That was a carefully constructed fiction, a digital ghost. The real Sarah Jenkins was Julian Blackwood's most lethal legal weapon. She was a woman who saw the law not as a set of rules, but as a weapon system. Their meetings were not therapy sessions. They were strategy meetings. The war room. The Icarus file is good, Sarah said on their first day, her pen tapping a rhythm on a legal pad. They were in the penthouse's vast empty living room. It's a confession, but it's an unsigned confession. It's his private ledger, his fantasy. To make this stick, we need to tie it irrefutably to the corporate server. We need to prove the work was criminal, not just the fantasy. The air-gapped server, Elena said, her voice flat. She had learned of it by accident, a passing comment Marcus had made about true security. Exactly, Sarah said, her eyes sharp. He's smart. He keeps his personal fraud Icarus on his laptop. He keeps his corporate fraud Lyra on his office desktop, which is air-gapped from the main network. We need to bridge that gap. We need the server logs, the real ones. Elena's blood chilled. How? He's the only one with access. It's behind a biometric scanner, and his office is... It's his domain. You're still his wife, Sarah said, as if she were pointing out the sky was blue. For now, you still have a right to your personal property. You're going to go collect your things. He'll never let me in the office, Elena breathed. He'll be there. He'll want to watch me. I know, Sarah said. You will play the part you have been rehearsing your entire marriage, the dutiful, emotional, and slightly dim wife. He is arrogant. He wants to see you cry. He'll be so focused on his own sadistic enjoyment that he won't be looking at your hands. Sarah placed a small matte black object on the table. It looked like a standard USB drive. This is not a normal USB. It's a high-speed data siphon custom-built by Mr. Blackwood's tech division. It doesn't copy, it clones. You'll plug it into the back of his desktop tower. You will have max 30 seconds. A red light will blink while it's cloning. When the light turns green, you pull it out. But you must get him away from that desk. I don't think I can, Elena whispered, the old fear returning. Sarah's gaze hardened. Yes, you can. Because this isn't just about his money, Elena. This is about your life. He implicated you. The only way out is to be the person who burns the whole thing down. You are not a victim here. You are the whistleblower. That is the narrative we are creating. It's the only one that keeps you out of a matching orange jumpsuit. So Elena did it. She arranged the call, her voice trembling, which wasn't hard to fake. She was collecting her personal effects. Marcus was there, as Sarah predicted. He was standing in his office by the glass wall, a whiskey in his hand. The afternoon sun hit his Zegna suit. He looked like a king and he knew it. Taking the... He gestured with a sneer at the empty cardboard boxes she'd brought. The books make sense. Not much else you're qualified for. Better brush up on that resume. I hear reception is a tough field to break into. Elena's hands clenched at her sides. Breathe. Play the part. You are weak. You are broken. She moved to the bookshelf, pulling out her art history volumes. Her hands were shaking. Don't even think about touching the art. He warned, his voice a low growl. The prenup's clear. All my assets. Your little hobby ends today. This was it. She needed a distraction. She let a single calculated tear roll down her cheek. Marcus, she said, her voice a perfect broken whisper. The painting. The small one. The one from our honeymoon in Venice. He frowned. Which one, the gaudy one? The watercolor, she choked out. From the balcony at the Gritty Palace. It's the only thing I want. Please. He stared at her, his face contorted not with pity but with a smug, profound satisfaction. She was begging. For a memory. It was perfect. He had won everything. Fine. He sighed, rolling his eyes with exaggerated annoyance. God, you're pathetic. It's in the safe. He turned his back to her. He walked to the large steel safe hidden behind a minimalist panel. Elena's heart was a hammer in her chest. Now. She heard the quiet beep of the keypad. She moved. Her purse containing the data siphon was on his desk. In 3 seconds, 3 heart-pounding, adrenaline-fueled seconds, she was behind the desk. Her hand fumbled for the USB port on the back of the desktop tower. Click. It was in. A small red light blinked. Once. Twice. Heh. Can't even remember the combo. Marcus muttered, his back still to her. Ah. 10/22/08. Their anniversary. The cruelty was almost poetic. Elena's eyes were locked on the blinking red light. Turn. Turn green. Please God, turn green. Thunk. The heavy thunk of the safe door opening. Blink. Red. Marcus huffed, rummaging inside. Blink. Red. Blink. Green. Here, he said, turning around. Elena's hand, moving faster than thought, yanked the drive. She shoved it deep into her purse just as she fumbled for a tissue, her body collapsing in a sob. Marcus didn't notice. He tossed the small framed watercolor onto a box of books. The glass cracked. Happy, he snarled. Thank you, she choked out. It was the truest thing she had said to him in years. She grabbed her boxes and fled. She didn't stop shaking until she was back in the penthouse, the data siphon clutched in her hand like a hot coal. She gave the drive to Sarah, who plugged it into a secure, encrypted laptop. A moment of silence as the files loaded. Sarah didn't smile, but her eyes, when she looked up, were alight. It's all here, she said. The Rosetta Stone. The final bridge. He's done. The trap was set. Now they just had to wait. For the next 2 months they played divorce. It was a magnificent circus. Sarah Jenkins, on Blackwood's orders, was a brilliant B-movie lawyer. She filed frivolous motions. She objected poorly. She let Roger Harding, Marcus's attorney, run circles around her. She filed a motion demanding the return of Elena's emotional support cat, a cat that had been dead for 15 years. Harding spent an entire week and an estimated $50,000 of Marcus's money to produce a death certificate. I want the house, Sarah would demand in depositions. It's outside the prenup, Harding would roar. My client decorated it sweat equity. Marcus was lapping it up. He was winning so hard. Grind her into dust, he'd told Harding over a celebratory steak dinner. During this time, Elena met with Blackwood only once. It was not on the yacht. That was too risky. It was in a private wing of the LACMA in front of a Francis Bacon. a screaming pope trapped in a glass box. "He's enjoying it," Elena said, her voice flat. "He loves watching me beg." "Of course," Blackwood said, his eyes on the painting. "Men like Marcus don't just want to win. They want their opponent to know they've lost. It's a weakness." He gestured to the painting. "He thinks he's in a soundproof box, but the whole world is watching. Arrogance is a fatal flaw, Elena. It makes you loud when you should be silent. It makes you think a bar fight is a war. He doesn't realize he's already in his cage." His words were not comforting. Not. They were cold. He was not her savior. He was her mentor in a new cold world. "The performance is almost over." The day of the final court date arrived. Elena stood in the penthouse looking at her costume, the drab gray suit, the sensible low-heeled shoes. Sarah Jenkins was by the door holding a briefcase. "You're ready." Elena looked at her reflection. A mousy, defeated, broken woman looked back. "He's going to smirk," Elena said. "I know. He's going to pat my shoulder or something." "He will," Sarah said, "and you will let him. You will be the perfect broken bird. You will look at the floor. You will let him have his victory, because you and I know what he doesn't." Sarah checked her watch. It was 8:00 a.m. The court hearing was at 9:00 a.m. "As of right now," Sarah said, "our real case, the whistleblower report authenticated by the Icarus Lyra data you secured, was electronically filed with the SEC and the IRS. The warrants are drafted. The agents are briefed. The moment that gavel hits, the real judge's order goes live." Elena took a deep breath. The air in the penthouse felt different. She was no longer a victim. She was no longer an actress. She was a soldier walking into the final battle. "Let's go lose a battle," Elena said. The morning after his victory, Marcus woke to a sound that was not part of his manicured, soundproofed world. It was a sharp, insistent official rapping at his front door. It cut through the thick whiskey and champagne fog in his head. It was 8:01 a.m. "Ugh, baby, make it stop," Candy's voice mumbled from beneath his $10,000 fret sheets. Marcus stumbled out of bed, grabbing a silk robe. He was annoyed, not alarmed. He was the king. Who would dare? He ripped open the massive custom-built door, ready to yell at a gardener or a delivery man. He froze. 6 men and 2 women, all in dark blue windbreakers with SEC and IRS emblazoned in stark yellow letters, were standing on his doorstep. Their faces were uniformly bored, unimpressed, and utterly devoid of mercy. "Marcus Thorne," the lead agent, a man named Davies, said. His voice was flat. "Who's asking?" Marcus grumbled, his mind still sluggish. Agent Davies didn't smile. He produced a warrant, holding it up like a crucifix to a vampire. "Mr. Thorne, you are the subject of a federal investigation into securities fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion. We have a warrant to seize this property and all assets within as proceeds of a criminal enterprise." The words didn't compute. "Seize you can't. This is a mistake. My ex-wife, she's just bitter. She's lying." "We're not here about your divorce, sir," Davies said, pushing past him. The entire team flowed into the house like water through a breach. "We're here about Project Lyra." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. "We're here about the Vandermeer accounts," another agent already in the living room called out. "We're here about account 739B in the Cayman Islands." Davies continued, his eyes scanning the foyer. Marcus's knees buckled. Account 739B. No one knew that name. Not Harding. Not his partners. Not even Candy. Only Elena. A high-pitched shriek came from the bedroom. Candy, confronted by a stern-faced female IRS agent, was scrambling for a bathrobe. Her fake, shocked, real terror face a grotesque mask. "You can't do this. I won this house," Marcus yelled, his voice cracking with a sudden sharp panic. "It's mine. The court. The judge said, you won an asset purchased with laundered funds, Mr. Thorne." Agent Davies said, not even looking at him. He was pointing at the large abstract painting in the hall, one of Elena's favorites. "Tag the suitor. We're taking that too." "That's mine." "It's evidence, sir. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal effects. Your wallet, your keys, your phone. That's it." Davies paused, then delivered the final casual execution. "And sir, you'll want to leave the Aston Martin. We're taking that too." He was escorted out. In his silk robe and slippers, he was forced to stand in his own driveway, the California sun just beginning to burn as his neighbors watched. He watched as they put his art, his furniture, his life into trucks. He watched Candy, now fully dressed and crying hysterically, get put into a taxi. He was a king. Now he was a spectacle. 2 days later, Marcus sat in a sterile $20 an hour rental office with peeling paint and the smell of stale coffee. The 48 hours in between had been a blur of concrete and fluorescent lights, a holding cell that smelled of bleach and despair, the one phone call. The humiliation of discovering every one of his credit cards was declined. His friends were no longer taking his calls. Roger Harding had officially recused himself, citing a fundamental conflict of interest. He'd only made bail by signing the title of his Patek Philippe watch, the one Candy had given him for his birthday, over to a bail bondsman who looked at him with pity. His new criminal lawyer, a man named Glass, who charged $2,000 an hour and looked like he hadn't won a case since the 90s had just left. The news was bad. It was apocalyptically bad. "The case they have," Glass had said, rubbing his tired eyes. "It's not a case, Marcus. It's a confession. They have everything. Server logs, encrypted emails, the wire transfer codes from Icarus to Lyra, and the final hop to the Caymans. Whoever this whistleblower is, they didn't just give the Fed smoke. They gave them the charred smoking building, the blueprints, and the receipt for the gasoline. And," Glass had added, "they threw in a motive. They have correspondence detailing your intent to divert funds for a new life with a Ms. C. Alvarez. It paints a very clear picture for the jury, and it's not a good one." Now Marcus was alone. His phone buzzed. It was a news alert from a financial journal he was still subscribed to. He almost ignored it. He clicked. "For immediate release, Vandermeer Collection partners with Metropolitan Museum of Art for new exhibit." He scoffed. Old money, old news. He was about to delete it when he saw the subheadline. "The ambitious new exhibit, The Hidden Hand Masterpieces of Provenance, will be guest curated by noted art historian Elena Hayes. The exhibition and a new acquisitions fund are being sponsored by a $100 million grant from the Blackwood Foundation." The phone almost slipped from his numb fingers. There was a photo. It was Elena. But it wasn't his Elena. It wasn't the defeated wife in the drab gray suit looking at the floor. It wasn't the mousy, bookish girl he'd married. This was a different woman. A new woman. She was standing on the iconic steps of the Met, flanked on one side by Beatrix Vandermeer and on the other by Julian Alistair Blackwood. She was wearing a sharp dark blue Armani suit that probably cost more than his lawyer. Her hair was cut in a sleek professional bob. Her eyes, looking directly into the camera, were not stormy. They were clear, cold, and utterly in command. The pieces didn't just fall into place. They slammed into him like an avalanche. Guest curated by noted art historian. His little hobby. Beatrix Vandermeer. The connection she made. The deal she charmed. The Blackwood Foundation. The man on the yacht. The cold, thin smile. Blackwood wasn't her lover. He was her patron, her sponsor. He was the Renaissance prince, and she was his master artisan of revenge. He finally understood. The divorce, the fight over the house, her pathetic begging. It was all theater. A grand, spectacular performance to establish her as a victim, not a co-conspirator. She wasn't trying to win the divorce. She was just running out the clock until the real war began. She had used her weakness, her little hobby, Her knowledge of art and provenance, her quiet, meticulous mind, and she had systematically and surgically dismantled his entire life. She hadn't just left him. She had erased him. Blackwood hadn't saved a damsel in distress. He had funded an avenging angel. Marcus Thorne looked at his reflection in the dark, silent screen of his phone. The smirk he'd worn just 48 hours ago seemed like a cruel, distant joke. He had played his game. He had won. He was the victor. But he never realized she and her billionaire mentor were playing a far bigger, far more ruthless game all along. The exhibit's title flashed in his mind, The Hidden Hand. It was her. And in her game, he wasn't just the loser. He wasn't the opposing king. He was the trophy. He was the masterpiece of provenance she had just hung on her wall. In the end, Marcus Thorne learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the person you think you've beaten. He was so busy celebrating his win that he never saw the real defeat coming. Elena didn't just get revenge. She reclaimed her life, her career, and her power, all by letting him think he was the winner. The biggest twists in life aren't the ones you see coming. They're the ones that have been planned meticulously in the shadows. What did you think of Elena's long game? Was it brilliant, or was it cold-blooded? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of epic revenge and shocking twists, make sure to hit that like button. It tells the algorithm you have great taste. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs a reminder that the game isn't over until the real winner is revealed. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel and ring that bell. We have so many more stories like this to tell, and you don't want to miss a single dramatic moment.